So it's like pretty spread across the board. I've heard good feedback and bad feedback for basically every level in the game, which
I bet
really
the
did
Americans hate
surprise
the soccer ones. I bet they always. I bet the Americans complain about the soccer ones.
Yep.
Yeah.
American
There's,
football's
like-
too complicated, though.
I love them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally.
I'm not getting yards gained and downs into a Fall Guys round. This doesn't make any sense.
Way too many rules.
You
Yeah,
should stick cricket and really troll them, or like rugby union or AFL.
God, yeah.
Yeah, we had some other Aussies that wanted AFL in. We have to think about that one.
Hello friends and welcome to Noclip. Danny here, and this week I'm delighted to be joined by two of the Fall Guys, two of the folks from Mediatonic, Megan Ralph and Joe Walsh, who have taken time out of their busy schedule to talk to us about the game that is on the tip of everyone's tongue. I was looking at our Discord server and you can see what people are playing, and it's just like Fall Guys, Fall Guys, Fall Guys. And that's to say nothing of what's going on the PlayStation. So first of all, thank you both so much for taking the time. Joe, have you gone asleep without hearing the theme music in your brain? Yes.
It haunts my every waking moment, that theme tune. But luckily, it's a great. One of the soundtracks. One of the things I'm most proud of that we managed to get right. So it's a good soundtrack to have lodged in your brain forever.
Yeah, I can. It's been haunting my dreams, but it's also been making me go back and keep playing all of those levels. So it's a good thing we have Megan here, who is lead level designer on the project. Megan, thank you so much for taking the time as well.
Thank you for inviting us. This is very exciting.
Of course. A little bit of backstory on Mediatonic, first of all. You guys are kind of like, there's a lot of studios like this in the UK. Guildford seems to be full of them, where you're sort of doing a lot of different types of work. There's contract work happening. There's, internal projects being spun up. It also seems like Mediatonic has multiple studios in the UK. I saw Guildford, Brighton, and there's one slap bang in the middle of London. I know you're working from home, but which office were you supposed to be in?
Yeah, so Fall Guys has been mostly made in the London office, but we've also had people from the Brighton office, and also we have an office in Madrid that was opened kind of during the development of Fall Guys, and we've had people helping out from there as well.
Crazy. And how big is... I checked the credits yesterday, and there was a lot of people who have obviously touched it, but in terms of the core dev team, like, how many of you have been on this? Like, how many at the start, and kind of what is it now?
So it's about, I think we peaked about 45 people, but we averaged about 30 throughout development, and I think we're about 40-ish at the moment right now. But hoping to get a bit bigger now that people are liking the game so much.
Yeah, I'm sure that sounds like a lot to people who don't work in game dev, but that's not considering how many people are playing it right now.
Small
It's
team.
pretty wild.
Yeah, it's never felt
absolutely.
like even close to enough to make this game. So we're still a bit of a shock that we got it out the door, to be honest.
Right. So I'd love to know a little bit more about the two of you as well. Megan, what's your history in game dev? Where have you worked before? What type of stuff do you specialize in?
So I've been in a lot of AAA previously. This is pretty different for me. So I started off at Team Bondi in Sydney a long time ago. Working on LA Noire. That's where I got my start as an intern. And from there, I jumped around a little bit and probably the most prominent studio after that would be Sony. I was there for a few years working on Blood and Truth, which is a VR game. You might have heard of that one. Yeah, that's a shooter, a VR shooter that came out a few years ago. And then Interior Night, working on some narrative stuff, which just got announced, I think, at the Microsoft thing. So I've sort of jumped around, worked at a few different types of studios, but a lot of sort of big AAA stuff, bigger studios, and coming to Mediatonic about a year ago. This is sort of a brand new experience for me. So probably the biggest project, but the smallest company that I've been involved with. So, yeah.
So presumably then, if you joined about a year ago, the project had been was already sort of in motion at that stage. Is that right?
It was, but you know what? We weren't that far along. Like Joe will be able to tell you a bit more about that. But basically, we had just done the demo for E3, and that's kind of, there was still so much to figure out, and we weren't really in full production by that point. So most of the levels and everything in the game was done in a year, basically. So when I joined, we kind of were just figuring everything out after the success of E3.
That's wild. So was that the Flashpoint then show? Was that showing at E3? Like, when did the project start? Because you've been on it since the inception, right?
Yeah, so we started the project in around about October 2018. So we've been working on it like nearly 2 years at this point. And E3 was the first time that we'd shown the demo, I think, to anybody outside of either the studio or Devolver. And obviously we had that fancy trailer go out, and that was the first inkling of, well, this is actually quite fun, quite good game. But obviously you never really have any idea at that point how that's going to translate.
Yeah, I'm sure. What was it like showing? Was the game playable then at E3 2019?
Yeah, so we had a 4-player demo where we hooked up we basically had like a 4-player LAN, and then we filled the game with about 50 other Fall Guy, like AI controlled Fall Guys, who did not a lot more than just run around randomly, but it gave the illusion of what this chaotic multiplayer game might be like, enough that people got really excited about the potential for it, like all being fully online.
Right. Let's talk about the, I guess, original concept for it, right? And I'm very interested to talk to you guys about this, because I'm, sort of a European transplant. I grew up in Ireland. I lived in London for a number of years, and I've been over here in the States for about 6 years. And when you talk to people about like this style of TV show, they're like, it's like the Gladiators, American Gladiators thing, or the Wipeout Takeshi's Castle thing, where they are ostensibly the same like game show, but the I don't know, the tone of them are totally different. And this feels so much closer to what I remember of those shows than, over here, where people are just a bit more like competitive and serious. Like, people take Gladiator seriously.
Yeah,
here.
totally. I mean, that was a conversation we had right at the beginning was, what game are we going to be? Are we going to be Takeshi's Castle, or are we going to be Ninja Warrior, American Gladiator?
Right.
And a big part of that conversation was like, the people that compete in Takeshi's Castle are middle-aged, overweight Japanese businessmen who have absolutely no right being on these courses, but they're full of enthusiasm and they can't wait to, suffer, essentially. And that's what the Fall Guy is really based on, are those people. But like, everyone's seen those clips where they like run up to the start of the stepping stones one, like slip over and give themselves some like, horrendous injury, and then cheer and then run off with gusto. And it's like, yep, that's basically the spirit of the game. Like, Fall Guys aren't taking these things too seriously. It's kind of why we don't have, a timer in the top right-hand corner of the screen telling you exactly what your splits are. It's just not supposed to be played in that way, really. People are doing it anyway, like there are speedruns online, but the DNA of it is in Takeshi's Castle for sure.
Right. So Megan, what was that like for you then? Because obviously you're like, I don't know the experience of growing up down under, but I know it's kind of like Ireland in a way that you do get a lot of British media. So was it a similar sort of?
Yeah, I mean, It's a Knockout. We had an Australian version of that, and that was massive. That was a really, really big part of my childhood. So I definitely had a few reference points. But what I find interesting about our game is, I think you're right, we came at it from we want it to be okay to fail, and we want it to feel silly and fun, but the way that it's been taken, which is very competitively, has sort of surprised me. I know, like watching people online get really mad when they fail. It sort of jogs my memory back to school sports carnivals and those sorts of sports day activities, which really don't mean much in the scheme of things, but the competitive nature of everyone really comes out in a really interesting way. So I think we've captured something interesting with the game.
That's funny you say that. Yeah, it's like there's always the person who, even though you're doing the sack race or the egg and spoon race, they're really determined to win. Yeah,
it's basically like the kid that throws the bat and goes home crying, in the middle of the just for fun cricket game. That's kind of what we've created with this monster, I think.
It's funny. I wonder what the split is with people who are taking it, because I play it completely. Like, to me, it's like a 10 p.m. I'm relaxing at the end of the day. This is probably why I don't have any crowns yet. I haven't actually won, but it's just like, my wife is watching over my shoulder. She's laughing because I did something stupid. Like, I don't care. It's totally chill. I wonder if there's like a self-selecting nature to how Twitch works as well, where people they're performing and they're trying to make it look like they're pro at a game, no matter what the game is. What's your feeling on that?
I think the funniest part for me is, so you might have seen social media, there's a big outcry about team games at the moment. And that to me is hilarious, because I think that people aren't really used to working together or having to compromise with other people. And that's just been a really interesting element with our game, because it's not something, I don't know about you, Joe, but I didn't think that would be controversial at all, having team games in the final product. But it's brought out how serious some people take this. Like, they feel like they've been robbed of a crown because their team was bad, and they don't take any responsibility at the end of the day with that stuff. I'm not saying that's not the case, but like, it's just been really interesting to me, because it really shows you how serious people take something like this game, which I think is very silly.
Yeah, what's your read on that, Joe? Have you noticed that people are? I'm sure going through feedback on this must be really difficult anyway. Just even trying to figure out which are the loud voices and which are the important ones.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's even harder for us because our game is not designed to be played at the peak of competition, and so a lot of people who are playing the game aren't people who will go on forums. Like, at least if you're working on a battle royale or a game that's viable as an esport, it benefits you to listen to the people who are playing at the peak, because they're the ones who have the insights into balance and tweaks and stuff like that. But with Fall Guys, there is this, I mean, we don't even know like how big this unspoken majority of families just knocking about, firing up Fall Guys and playing a few rounds is. So, and so we have to be really careful not to jump on those changes. But we are listening. I think that's an important thing to state. It's like, just because someone gets angry and posts on Reddit doesn't mean that they're not right. And I think what we want to look into soon is kind of figuring out ways that like everybody can play Fall Guys in their own way. Like, those people are really important. I think one of my favorite things is, you see it a lot on Twitch, was this idea that Fall Guys is a game for children and that you should be embarrassed if you don't win. It's really funny, because like streamers just get wound up where their chat are just like, how could you lose at this like baby game? It's colorful and it's stupid, and I think that's really funny to watch. I'm enjoying that a lot.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a generational thing in this, in that like, if you grew up, if your main like moment in games has been the past 3 years with all of these battle royale games, then like, sure, I can see how like the get good nature of wanting to, win, to be the last person standing, if you're playing Fortnite or PUBG or whatever, can translate into a game that sort of on the face of it looks very similar. But that's clearly not. And like, in your marketing, it never even looked like you were even attempting. Did I see the word battle royale written anywhere even, or?
It's something that we shied away from initially, because it's not really a battle royale, and we didn't want to become a battle royale. But we found that just when you were trying to explain the game to people, I mean, it's basically similar to how like Destiny was not an MMO for 3 years until eventually they gave up and they're like, it's fine, it's an MMO, whatever.
Right.
It kind of feels like that. Was like, if you guys want it to be a battle royale, it makes it easier for us to talk about it that way, and so that's definitely brought a certain crowd to it too.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll get into the sort of what comes next stuff a little bit, but I want to bring you both back, a year ago, to when you had that version that had done well at E3, and you were figuring out what I guess is the sort of the crux of what makes this game work for people, which is the way in which your character controls and the levels in which they inhabit. So excuse me. If I could talk about the controls first of all. One of the things that stands out to me in Fall Guys is the fact that obviously the controls are very simple, but they're also consistent across levels. There's no unique control schema for any one. Sometimes you have to grab more than others perhaps, but it's not like there's a special ability or something you pick up or anything like that. You control consistently regardless of what level you're in. Was that something that was like important from the start? Can you talk about the design decision around that, and also some of the limitations that sort of creates?
Yeah, it was absolutely deliberate for that reason, in that we wanted people to be able to pick up and play their game and not have to relearn things when new mini games came in. I think one of the frustrations of Mario Party is the fact that you have to go through this tutorial each time you play something, and it kind of stunts the experience a bit, and you feel like you've already played it before you've even gotten in. And I get why Mario Party do it, but for us it was really important that once you learnt the controls, that was it. You were like good to go, and that meant we had to kill a lot of level ideas very early on. We had ideas about putting Fall Guys in like a giant Zorb and like rolling them down a hill and stuff like that. Or, you know, in this level you've got like a fishing rod that you can pick up and do all of these things. And ultimately we kind of basically had to make a bet that we could come up with enough good level ideas using a specific set of mechanics. And I think the grab is the one that kind of gave us the ability to do the tail grabbing games, the carrying games. We've got more stuff that we want to do with grab. Like, I still think we haven't really found the limit yet on what these controls can do, but it's very much like a deliberate act to keep things as simple as possible. One thing that comes up a lot is, like, why do you have grabbing in the races? Because you don't need to carry anything. And again, that comes back to the same thing of like, it has to be consistent. We have to find that sweet spot where you can grab in one game and you can grab in the other, and players aren't going to be asking on forums like, what, is it broken? Like, I don't understand. You can't have those. I think really great games don't have arbitrary rules. The game should never say it's this way because we say so. And I think Fall Guys I'm pretty pleased with where we got to, where it feels consistent and the character responds in different ways in each round.
Yeah, I can certainly imagine a scenario in which you taking that grab out of a level suddenly opens up a possibility space in the player's head where they're like, oh, I guess the controls change every level and I'm forgetting. Maybe there's something in this one I don't know about. Megan, from your side then, you know, I love creative constraints. You know, they sort of breed innovation in an interesting way. But what's it like on the level design side then, trying to, you know, tweak levels or come up with ideas for levels that have you in quite a small creative box?
It's been really hard, but like you said, we've gotten some amazing ideas out of those constraints, which has been great, because thinking about the levels, you really have to boil it down to the most simple versions of something that you can. Like, even though we do have a grab and like a climb, like a mantle style pull up, we don't make you do that in any of the levels. Like, there's no points where you actually have to learn that. You only really need to know how to jump, maybe occasionally dive if you want to, but even that's pretty optional, and that's it, and move the controller around. And that has been a great way of making us really be able to justify everything that we put in a level. So you can really boil it down to saying, like, what is the purpose of this block? Why are we putting this here? Or do people know what to do in this section just with the way that we've laid something out? So that's actually been really nice. It sort of takes you back to your original days of studying, or, you know, level design fundamentals of thinking like, everything I put in here has to have a reason.
Right.
Which has been really fun and really good for the team, I think. We originally had even more constraints on the players, things like locked cameras. We didn't have the full camera control and stuff like that, which was significantly harder to design around, because everything had to be sort of facing the one angle and you couldn't have, you know, multi-level things. So I think we've hit a really good middle ground of being able to give players a little bit of control over what they're doing, but still making it easy enough that I had friends over on the weekend and they're not gamers, and I was able to give them a controller, tell them what jump is, and they figured out how to get, you know, to the end of the races. They figured out what to do in the levels by watching what other people did as well. You know, a lot of the people that are already in the game are the best tutorial. You know, so watching how a round is being played is kind of better than having a screen that no one's going to read as well. So there's things like that which are really, really fascinating that I think have really helped the level designs.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about it. That sort of the brief window you have to teach somebody how a level works, right? You have a very quick, you know, very sort of Nintendo-esque flyby cut of like, this is what's coming up. Kind of feels like the start of a Mario Kart level or something like that. But it's very brief and it doesn't oversell it. Do you think perhaps, you know, the way I come to it, I guess, is that the first time you try any level, it's always just going to be like, well, we'll see how this goes. Do you think players are kind of forgivable that way, or is there work you're doing to give them at least an idea of what they're supposed to do, you know, right off the bat?
To be honest, I think with some of the rounds we can do a better job of that, and that's something that we're sort of looking at doing for things like Jinxed. You know, it can be really hard to sort of get the point of that level across. So there are things that like we've done that will be coming later, where we've changed the intro cam to focus a bit more on the Jinxed players. We might put some more text on the screen, you know, things like that we can do later, and we can update after we've released the game. But to be honest, we went back and forth quite a lot about how we explain this stuff to players, and we went through that exact thing of like having a screen where things are written out. People don't read it, you know. People aren't going to sit there and go through a tutorial that you have to get through a menu or something like that. So I kind of think it's worked out quite well, because yeah, the first time people play around, they might not fully understand what it is, but we've not made a game that people are going to play once. So it kind of works,
right?
You know, like people will not win their first tournament, but they're going to see, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 different rounds, and they're going to have an idea of what to do in those rounds. And then the next time they get in them, they're going to improve on that. So it's not perfect, but I think it works the way that we've got it. What do you think?
Sorry, go on, Joe.
So I was going to say, like, I think it really speaks to like one of the level pillars we had early on, which was that every round has to be explained in like 2 or 3 words. And so, you know, it's just like slime is bad, match the fruit, race to the finish. And I think that
through doors.
Yeah, totally. And that was the level. That was what we wanted, basically, was that even if you didn't understand, you know, the person sat next to you while you're playing, it's like, where it's like, what do I have to do on this other side? I just run through the doors. I just match the fruit, whatever. That was really important, and I think it really works in the game. Like that, even if you don't understand something, you can pick it up very, very quickly, and there aren't these like hidden rules that you will only understand if you've played games before. It all should be like very, very clear. Like even something like the egg game, like egg scramble, just there's something innate about hoarding eggs in a basket. It just feels right, and if those eggs were random cubes or something like that, you don't have that same. What am I supposed to do with these? But you see eggs, and there's just people have this desire to just like hoard them somewhere. It just kind of works, I think.
That's interesting. So there's a lot of sort of like, you know, small design decisions which kind of make your job easier in that respect.
Yeah, in conjunction with art, who've done the most amazing job of decking out the levels. Like there's a lot of like visual communication, which you don't necessarily pick up when you're first playing the game, but like, you know, showing team areas and highlighting what a basket is and all of that sort of stuff. It gives you that information without having to sort of spell that out.
Yeah,
I
was actually
through really that stuff.
Yeah, I was interested to ask you guys about that. I'm not sure, you know, how, you know, connected to the art side. I'm sure you've all touched everyone else's work in some respect, but how much you can speak to it. But what's interesting to me is, you know, I've worked in graphic design for years, but it's 2D. I've never worked in that sort of 3D spaces. And what I find really incredible is like the palette is so vibrant, but everything is still readable. And I don't really understand how that's possible. Like it has the sort of the frenetic color space of like, you know, a Chuck E. Cheese, a children's like ball pit, but still I never lost. Can you guys speak to that at all? Like how is that just like a lot of level design iteration, or are there some rules happening there about silhouetting? Or
I think we have excellent communication with our artists and concept artists, and that's something that I was really set on developing as we, you know, made the levels. So we have this process where the level designer will do the block out as they normally do. So they'll create a level just using simple shapes with the basic functionality of that level, and we can play test that, see how people experience it, fix up any problems or anything that people don't understand. And then we sit down with the concept artists and the artists that are going to be working on the levels, and we'll explain the function of all those things in the level. Like I was saying, everything is in there for a reason, and we can justify that. So when we pass levels over to art, we'll sit down and have a direct meeting with them and give them diagrams with everything notated on what is important and why we've got things and why things are shaped the way that they are. And the levels, I mean, the artists being amazing at what they do, make them beautiful. So they'll keep that functionality and those design decisions, and they'll just make them even better. So like you'll notice like there's the arrows that are sort of floating next to the levels and the drone cameras and stuff like that. So they'll add little touches like that which help lead the eye to the things that you need to emphasize in a level. So it's a combination of us going through what's important and them sort of adding those embellishments that you don't necessarily pick up on, but they do an extremely good job of showing you what you have to do. in a level. So
yeah, and to marry that with what Joe was saying before, I guess about the eggs, right? Is that I was quite surprised when I saw the golden egg, because I was like, oh, this level has like another layer to it that wasn't explicitly told to me. But I get it. Like, all I needed to see was the gold egg, and I'm like, that's probably worth more than the other ones.
yeah, it's funny actually. Like, a huge part of game design is visual cues. So on LA Noire, I remember one of my favorite things is every door you can go through in that game has a gold doorknob, and all the doors that you can't have silver doorknobs. Now, nobody picked up on that, but everybody could figure out which doors they could go through. And that's just something that was like just a beautiful piece of design, I think. I've tried to take a lot of those lessons that I've learned from other games and done that. So knowing that something is golden, you just know it's worth more, right? And that it's special. Yeah. You don't necessarily know it's worth 5 points. Everything gold in the game is worth 5 points. There are gold hoops as well in the hoop game. But just leaning on those little design things that I've learned previously working on other games has really helped, I think. And it's funny how effective it is, because it's exactly what you said. You knew exactly what those eggs were. They were special. They were better. They would be worth more. And people have just picked that up, which is just really rewarding to see, I think, when you watch people play the game.
Yeah, it's I'm interested in like what levels or what, you know, Joe, you're saying about how you tried to keep everything pretty simple, right? That 3-word sort of pitch was where you started and ended with it. And obviously there are sort of like strategies and there's a sort of a meta going on in each level, but the decision to have like gold hoops, like Megan was saying, and gold eggs as well, like that is another layer on top of, you know, a layer of complexity that perhaps isn't there in some other ones. Or maybe it is. Maybe the race is just having different types of obstacles as part of that too. Where do you draw the line on this level is too complex, this level is too plain? Because some of the stuff is rather basic. Like the one I'm thinking of is the sort of the one where the thing is rotating up and you're jumping over or missing the paddles. Like the start of that is pretty basic, right? It takes a while for it to sort of heat up. So where do you find that sweet spot? Is it a lot of playtesting?
Yeah, I think a big thing that was a focus is that the levels have to be really replayable, and they also have to have a sense of tension that builds toward the end, to the point where things aren't a foregone conclusion. And that's a lot of the time when we would layer something extra on, is that we'd play Egg Scramble and a team would be up by 10 points, and it was like, well, it kind of feels like it's done with 30 seconds left and people are probably going to stop playing. And I was like, well, if we put golden eggs in, let's put 4 of them in, so there are 3 teams and 4 eggs, so it's always in balance.
Right.
Because if we can find those golden eggs and steal them, you can still win. And it was the same with like the hoops or anything like that. It was this extra thing that meant with 10 seconds to go, you didn't feel like everything was done. And that was kind of the decision, was like, do we need to add something? Is it worth going for here?
It's also things like the golden hoops and the golden eggs aren't vital to the gameplay, so you don't need to know that those are worth more. It's not going to change the way that you play the game. You know, it's not going to change that game. It is something laid on, just as Joe said. But like when you are pitching a round type or a level type that's like, say, something asymmetrical where everybody has to stand on a button and another team has to do something, that is vital to the gameplay. So explaining those objectives, those separate objectives for those 2 groups of people, that's too difficult to explain, and that's going to affect the gameplay. But something like the golden eggs or the things that we've layered on, like having different balls in Fall Ball spawn out of the sky, that's not going to affect the gameplay, but it is going to give you a slightly different experience. I think that's probably the best way to explain that.
Right. So, you know, you've had a team of, 40 odd people working on this. I'm sure a diligent QA department also helping out. But then, suddenly, what is it, 1.5 million people or something, probably a lot more now, playing. I want to ask you, first of all, what was the weirdest strategy you didn't think of? Was there anything that players were doing in any of the levels that you were like, oh no, how did they figure that one out? Or were you guys watertight?
The first one was probably the you can jump on the at the side rails in Block Party, and you can skip the whole level by just hanging out and watching other people fail, which is really funny. And now I've seen people, like, the community are very anti this strategy, quite rightly. And so I've seen people get their friend to, like, boost them up and then grab the cheater and pull them off into the slime with them. It's like there is this police force out there that are trying to stop people griefing.
They, like, sacrifice themselves. Like,
yeah, they're just like, I don't mind if I go out. I'm taking this cheater with me, which has been that's one of the favorite things I've seen so far.
I really like in Whirligig, which is one of the gauntlet levels, which with the spinny bars, people are yeeting themselves across the level by getting hit at the right angle with some of the bars. So they're finishing the level in like 10 seconds by just getting hit on the right.
High risk maneuver.
Yeah, I love it though. It's just great when you watch what people have been able to figure out. Stuff like that I love it.
So were you anticipating there might be more cheating or anything like that going on, or are you relatively satisfied that you managed to, like, keep the competitive nature of the game pure?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the double-edged sword of having a game that's really popular. Is, you know, when we were making the game, I can't speak too much about the various cheating things in the game for obvious reasons, but we basically had to make a decision, like, is it really worth us spending months and months on anti-cheat? Because if no one plays the game, then it doesn't matter if people are cheating or not, because we only got 5 people. And so we made the decision to just, like, double down on making the game fun and stable and rewarding, with the hope that we would have this problem. But luckily now we're able to really double down on it. You know, we've got the resources to really crack down. So people are going to have to bear with us probably for a while as we, like, really figure out what people are doing. And as with any popular multiplayer game, it's cat and mouse. Like, we're always going to patch one thing and people will find something new. But, you know, I think that Fall Guys, there are enough people playing and stuff that it should be fairly rare, even at the moment, for you to see these things.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about then, you know, sort of where you are at the moment, right? It seems like it's a wonderful place to be, I'm sure. It also comes with a lot of its, you know, stresses. It's sort of like capturing lightning in a bottle in many respects. What you do with it next, you know, is key to the health of the game. Perhaps, who knows? You know, you're not the first studio to sort of go through this. It's not very common, but, you know, there has been other studios in recent memory that have had a similar path, perhaps, or have found themselves with a really hot potato in their hands all of a sudden. Is there any other studios that you're sort of looking at, or games that feel like as close to a guiding rod as you can kind of attach yourself to? Or do you really feel like you're in your own sort of unique ground?
I think the biggest one that we've always referenced is Rocket League, because we share a lot of the same DNA in that we were both a game that launched on PlayStation Plus and then went stratospheric out of nowhere and became this, like, household name. And, like, I mean, if we end up like Rocket League, that would be incredible. But they struck that really great middle ground of, it's like a casual game that you can be rubbish at and it's still super fun. But they've been able to build on that over time, and they've managed to keep a game, you know, that is super fun. Like, I play Rocket League, you know, all the time still. And they've done a great job, I think, of, like, fostering a lot of different communities. Like, you can go and play Rocket League and be an esport and it can be super competitive, or you can just have a few beers on a Friday night and there's stupid playlists where you're now playing ice hockey or basketball and things. And I think that ability to not take themselves too seriously while also catering to the wide variety of fans they have is, like, a great reference point. And I think they're very open with their community, they're very honest that they've not got everything perfect. And I think, you know, we are a studio in uncharted territory for us, and it's going to be the same. We're going to probably screw some things up, and I think just being open and candid with your community is really important. And I would like to draw as much inspiration from Psyonix as we can, I think.
I think for me, that's the biggest. The culture of our studio is so different from every other studio I've been a part of. Like, I love Mediatonic because we're encouraged to be, I think, more open than a lot of studios, and we do engage with fans and we do listen to fans, and it's genuinely a really good group of people who are just excellent at their job, willing to learn and open to that sort of change, I guess. So for me, it's been a very, very different kind of launch. I mean, you've seen that with social media, like our Twitter account has just gone viral. We've had Ollie, which is just one guy who's been doing all of that and creating all that buzz.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, and he is like, and you know, we haven't paid anyone to stream it. We haven't approached anyone specifically for that. It's just purely because he is a really funny, weird sort of guy that's put out his personality, and it's just paid off. And I think that sort of is a good representation of the studio, that we are sort of like encouraged to be ourselves, and we are all a bit silly, and we're willing to try new things. I mean, if we weren't a studio like that, this game never would have gotten into development. I don't know of many studios that would have sort of taken the risk to develop something like this, because it's such a challenge and such a weird one that, you know, we took it on without fully, I guess, understanding what it was, and we've made it into something that's amazing and really unique because of that. You know,
I think that's the only reason. I think the only reason we did it is that we didn't really understand how hard it would be. I think if we knew now, we'd be like, God, no, that sounds impossible. Why would anyone want to make that?
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Meg.
Oh, I was just, and we're not really beholden to a larger publisher. You know, Devolver have fully got our back, and they're just as fun and interesting and weird as us. So it's just been a really, really fun launch, I guess, you know, to sort of be encouraged to be out there and to say stuff and to just do your thing. So yeah,
it must. I think I was thinking a lot about the launch over the past couple of nights, and you know, you didn't get to have that slow community build. We do a series on the development of Hades, Supergiant, who made Transistor and Bastion, their game in early access, and one of the things that they chose early access for, apart from, I'm sure, getting a wad of cash from Epic, was the idea that they had this small community that they could sort of read, that they could, you know, they were the most passionate fans, so in a way it was a little bit self-selective, but it meant that the QA or the feedback on you know, bugs or gameplay tweaks or any of that sort of stuff was fairly small. It was manageable. They put in processes for, you know, basically rating feedback, how important stuff was, how long it would take to deliver it, how many, you know, other things it would affect if it was implemented that might have a cascading effect. You obviously don't have that opportunity. You have an embarrassment of, you know, of feedback coming in, just an incredible amount of it, which I'm sure is great, but it's also a bit of a hindrance. What's the strategy, do you think, for taking that feedback? And also, how much does that feedback really play in? We've heard a lot from developers that, you know, any one player will complain about A, and A isn't actually what needs to be fixed. It's like D that made A happen. How are you dealing with the feedback, and what's your strategy for, you know, I guess, resolving those issues or trying to tweak the game for players?
I think, firstly, the thing is to not rush it and to not jump on things that you're scared about, and give the game time to breathe, and let these like strategies come out, and let's see how people feel about certain things in a couple of weeks. Like the worst mistake we could do right now is to jump on something and then break the core of the game that we've worked so hard to create. I think we're not only reading forums and stuff, we're also looking at data too, to try and give us a slightly less biased view of things. You know, what rounds are people playing and then kind of not really coming back to the game for? Like, where are the kind of like pinch points, I guess, in the game is a big thing. But also, you know, just making sure that we're trying to get feedback from as many different places as possible, making sure that we're not just reading our Discord, but we're going on like the Reddit, we're going on like Facebook fan groups or whatever, and just like making sure that we're trying to listen to everybody, but also not forget that like our instinct has got us this far. You know, we made 95% of this game of just going on what we thought was good, and to a certain extent we kind of got to trust our gut that that's what has gotten the game this good reception. So it's tough. It's a real balance, because you know, like, you develop kind of thick skin as a designer, but you go on a forum and you read this thing about how, you know, what half-wit designer could have ever thought that, you know, this feature would be a good idea, and you have this desire to just go change it instantly. And it's just trying to balance all of those things, trust your gut a little bit because it's got you this far, and talk to the team and see how they feel about things too.
Yeah, I agree. It's not an exact science at all, and I think Joe's 100% right in that. It's one thing to read all the feedback and to be involved in that, which is what we're trying to do, but it's being able to trust yourself enough to pick out the things that you also agree with, as a long-term thing and trying to change that. And we're sort of in an interesting spot because development was such a short turnover from the initial start of the game through to creating. A lot of the stuff that we're hearing back is stuff that we wanted to do but just didn't have time to do anyway. So it's not that much of a surprise to us, which is also
and that's
helpful.
probably a good thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To know that you're sort of on track with that, with expectation, it's similar.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to hear that, actually.
What's it like then? Adding new levels, you're in an interesting spot, right? Because up until now, there was a flood of levels at the start. Every single level you add now is going to have so much scrutiny applied to it. People are going to be like, "Oh, I wanted more team games." Oh no, and like, "Oh, they need to add more." Different types to the final level there needs to be more. More of a mix there. What's the strategy for that? Do you think it'll be a case of launching a bunch of levels in a go, adding levels? I'm assuming you're not going to pull any out.
No, I don't think so. I don't think we have enough to do that, to be honest. Right. I don't. I think we're still sort of working out exactly what the plans are for future seasons and future content. That's sort of what we're going through at the moment. But I think it'll be packets of levels. So there'll be a few at a time that we'll release. Some of them will just be new maps for existing stuff, but some will be totally brand new levels. It's going to be, a few different things we're going to drop in at once, because obviously those drops are, hard to do in the middle of play as well. It's interesting because everybody has a different level in this game, which surprised me, actually. Like, people
that they like or that they dislike?
Both. So it's like pretty spread across the board. I've heard good feedback and bad feedback for basically every level in the game, which
I bet
really
the Americans hate the soccer ones. I bet the Americans complain about the soccer ones. Yep. Yeah.
American football's too complicated, though.
I love them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Totally.
I'm not getting yards gained and downs into a Fall Guys round. This doesn't make any sense.
Way too many rules.
You should stick cricket and really troll them, or like rugby union or AFL.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had some other Aussies that wanted AFL in. You have to think about that one. But yeah, so I'm actually really pleased about that. The fact that, people love things, people hate them, and it's different for everybody. Like, you do get levels that get a bit more scrutiny than others, but generally I think we have a really good spread of different content in the game. That's what we were aiming for, and we didn't want to create rounds that everybody's going to love. If we wanted to create that sort of same experience, we just would have done races, like obstacle courses, but we wanted to give you a range of things to do, and we wanted to sort of mix it up and put stuff like survival stuff in and logic-based match games and stuff like that, because we wanted to give you that sort of varied experience. That's a whole part of it. So even though, you get a lot of hate come back for some things, I think we've kind of nailed it, to be honest. And I think we're going to aim to do similar things, like just broaden that scope of what we've actually got in there.
I think, like, the analogy we were making a little bit is like, it's like in a battle royale, when you drop in like Warzone, for example, sometimes you get 3 pistols in a row from your first chests and it's rubbish, and you've got this impossible route to the finish line, and you're not like happy about it in the moment, and it's very easy to like go on the forums like, I want a decent gun every single time I spawn, but that variance, sometimes you spawn, you get 3 golden guns in a row and it's amazing, and that meter that changes your experience each time is what creates that freshness. And I think that's why it's important that we have levels that are slightly easier, levels that are slightly harder. That's really, really important to us. And I think the other thing is that the DNA of this game is that comes from game shows and comes from turning on the TV and not knowing what on earth you're going to watch. What are these poor people going to be subjected to this time? And so that's really what we need to make sure that we do, is add variety. And that variety doesn't have to be new minigame. That variety can come from new ways to play old minigames. It can come from tweaks to existing minigames. Like, for example, like we talked about, like the American football dropping in football. All of that is about making interesting moments and things you want to record or tell people about. Like, you'll never imagine what happened to my round in Fall Guys that didn't happen in yours. And so a big part of what we want to do now is like double down on that. And so it's like, oh yeah, you played Full Mountain 100 times. Well, tough. This time it's different. So you better like focus, because now it's fruit raining down rather than the boulders. Now it's, the spinners right at the end, just when you thought you were safe. And I think that stuff is like, we can start to get a bit more devious with the level designs as well, which I'm quite looking forward to doing.
Yeah, and I imagine once the audience catches up with you, because there's that whole, you talk about that, texture is important. Texture is important in life. It's important in games. Just having those peaks and valleys for people, so that the highs feel higher and maybe the lows don't feel so low. But it adds that variety to it. You talk about the first documentary we ever produced on Noclip was with Psyonix about Rocket League, because I was a huge fan of Unreal Tournament 2004, which is where that originally came from. It took a long time to make their hit. But what was interesting was that, in the 12 months after that game came out, they did add a lot of, they had that seasonal approach, which kind of feels like it might be what, Fall Guys could use as well, because the idea of keeping a player base, like you're not Destiny, like the idea of keeping the player base at this height forever is untenable, right? I imagine the future of this is those peaks and valleys, right? They add in hoop games or whatever, the basketball thing into Rocket League. Suddenly everyone's back playing Rocket League for a couple of weeks. The diehards are always there, but there's more people. They added in the variability with like gravity for the ball, the sizes. Everyone comes back. Ice hockey, everyone comes back. Is that kind of where you feel Fall Guys is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like variety is the spice of life, and we know that Fall Guys is like, comedy is kind of gimmicky in that sense, and like mini games are kind of gimmicky, and it's going to be about creating these moments that bring people back to the game because there's this new stupid thing we're asking you to do. Like, and I think that's fine. I think we can be like open as a studio and say that like Fall Guys, potentially for a lot of people, is a game you just pick up every now and again when you're done, like when you're sick of losing other games, or you've like been grinding for hours and you just want something uplifting and fun. Just fire
it's
up.
100% why I was playing a couple of nights ago.
And it's been weird because there are people who've completed our entire season pass twice over already because they're playing Fall Guys 10 hours a day, and that's incredible. That's amazing. But part of us is like, slow down, because like you're going to burn yourself out, and we've got to try and keep up with this pace, which is a very strange place to be in, but very exciting at the same time.
Yeah, I think it was kind of mostly intended to be a palate cleanser rather than like a main game for a lot of people. So it's really sort of surprised us.
Yeah, some people just like to eat the ginger over and over again.
Yeah, it's a bit shocking. But I think that's the key to the season stuff. Yeah, it's just to drop in fresh new stuff and give people a slightly different experience when they can sort of find the time to jump back in later on. And it's really just, at the moment, we're figuring out, we're trying not to panic and to just shove the stuff in there because we want to keep things fresh immediately. We're trying to plan it out so we do it properly over a long term, which is an interesting situation to be in after a really successful launch. So you can't complain.
Yeah,
really.
I imagine. Yeah, so a lot of people get to take time off after their game comes out. Well, maybe not so much these days. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I have a bunch of questions from our patrons. We'll do these quick fire. Is that okay?
Sure.
Excellent. Thanks so much, everyone, for supporting our work. Patreon.com/Noclip if you want to get access to the Discord and chuck in your questions. First one's from James. Any possibility of a split screen mode, or are you fearful of players teaming up?
So we really wanted to do split screen mode for a long time with Fall Guys, but I think it's one of the things that is, people don't quite appreciate how hard split screen is to do, because you essentially have to get your game to run twice, and it's been a struggle to get the game to run once, like a huge effort. Like, I can't believe it runs. The idea of being like, okay, cool, now let's make it twice as efficient as it currently is like, it's not impossible, but it's a huge chunk of work. I would love
to make it 30 people instead of 60.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, these things are just, I don't understand them at all. But I would love to bring it.
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
God,
were you guys always, was 60 always where it was, or did you try the big 3 digits?
Yeah, it was 100 for the first year of development probably, and it was just too insane. It wasn't fun.
Really? Would you have to have had more rounds to trim people out, or?
No, they probably would have been similar percentages, but having, like, we always talk about this, having a battle royale where there's 100 players in a level is different because they're never in the same space. But in our game, they're all in the same area. So having 60 players and 100 players in the same area is very different, and it feels the same having that many people. So, like, you know, even though you are playing a battle royale with 100 players, you don't really get that experience of being in that 100 players until the end, you know?
Yeah.
So
it's like it's more like 60-person Mario Kart or something. In Fall Guys.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think like
sorry, go on.
Sorry, yeah, Super. I was going to say like the moment was like we tried to play DoorDash with 100 people, and having them try and fit through those doors, and it tips the scale because that level's already nuts, and it tips the scale from being like I'm laughing and this is stupid, and eventually I'm going to get through these doors to just like I'm at the bottom of a pile of 70 other Fall Guys trying to get through, and it like it wasn't fun to be brutally honest.
Yeah, did you have to? I imagine there's a lot of bugs where players were like clipping off each other and just flying. Like, there's a lot of network physics stuff going on in this game.
Yeah, for sure. A big one was like if someone was slightly laggy.
Oh, right. Yeah,
like they'd lag and then they'd teleport, and then they teleport with such ferocity that they would essentially become a projectile, and they'd like smash a bunch of other players off the map. I don't even know how we fixed that, but
that's
crazy.
Pro strats. That's pro strats. Oh. You can't just plug out your router for a second, or you just you put some tinfoil over the. That's amazing.
I always joke that I'd love to do a DLC drop that is just all of the buggy versions of our levels, because I think it would be hilarious. It'd be really funny. Leave like everything in there.
Nightmare Party. I actually have a question about DLC here from Liam. DLC maps or keep it all cosmetic? Because you guys have launched with, you sort of have the coin. There's not all that much. I went and bought some yesterday just to test it out. A couple of extra costumes, and you can buy the currency as well. You going to keep it to that, do you think, in terms of in-game purchases, or are you testing the idea? Because I imagine at the start of all this, the idea of splitting the player base is probably the last thing you wanted to do.
Yeah, we don't have any plans to do paid DLC for maps for that exact reason. In that, like, you just don't want to turn this type of game into like the haves and the have-nots of content and things like that. I think we're likely to do, you know, fun costume packs and maybe IP collaborations and stuff down the line, which people chuck us a couple of quid for just so we can fund the servers which keep setting fire. But yeah, it's important that all the maps and stuff are free.
Yeah, how are your engineers doing? Because I know that must be a monumental task to try and keep this stuff up.
They're amazing. Like, genuinely, I don't say that lightly, but the problems that those guys have solved, and they've been hitting it pretty hard since launch, I've got to say, just sort of keeping things down. But yeah, they're the most incredible team. We don't have that many compared to a lot of bigger games, and they're just a phenomenal group who have basically taken on not just networked games, but 3D games, you know, as their first game. You know, we've got a lot of people who weren't really experienced in the industry. Yeah, and they've just nailed it. So,
yeah. So you said, Joe, as well, you're getting that support. That there's a bit more. You're getting a couple more troops maybe to help out in the areas that are critical at the moment.
Yeah, I think so. I think it kind of has to happen at this point. You know, like strike while the iron is hot, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both so much for jumping on. I could talk to you about this all day, but I'm conscious of the fact that it's already tea time in Blighty, so you guys should enjoy a bit of your evening. Was there anything you wanted to mention, you know, to fans of the game or anyone who's been playing? Any message? I know you've been doing the rounds on a bit of media, but what would you like to say to the players out there who have been enjoying Fall Guys? When should they see some more updates coming?
Well, I think we just pushed our first hotfix live, which has been, you know, a big effort for the team just to go through that process for the first time. But we have we play tested a new level yesterday that was looking really good. You know, there's plenty of stuff in the pipeline. It's frustratingly slow as a studio now because the thing is out there, and if the tiniest bug gets through, it's millions of people potentially who suffer. So the process of like us getting comfortable with putting out updates is going to probably take us a while to settle into, but like we're every day reading forums and seeing suggestions and things, and we have a huge backlog now of fan suggested things that need to go in, which is a really good place to be in.
Yeah. It's a very hammy thing to say, but just thank you to everyone who's bought and played the game or got it on PS Plus, because you've blown us all away, and some of the content we're getting back and some of the suggestions has just been amazing. So that has been so rewarding. I think just sort of seeing people experience the game for the first time and just listening to their feedback is just the most rewarding thing. I love it.
Yeah. Well, Joe, Megan, congratulations on a fantastic launch. Congratulations to the rest of Mediatonic. Take care of yourselves. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And we look forward to seeing more from both of you and the rest of the team in the future.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thanks
very
very
much.
much.
No worries. And thanks to everyone for listening and watching this week's podcast. We are available if you've been listening to this on iTunes, which most of you are. You can actually watch these as well on youtube.com/NoClipPodcast. You can support the show at patreon.com/NoClip. We got some fun new guests coming up for the next couple of episodes. I'm going to keep my lips sealed for the moment because we're just trying to make sure the scheduling works out. But yeah, if you have any suggestions as well, of course, let us know in the Patreon Discord. Thank you. Go play Fall Guys, and we'll talk to you next time.